Hello everybody, Sparkster1701 here. As we get ready to end this pretty wild month that we've been through, we're going to take a look at two different sets of toys. We're going to take a look at Soundwave and his spy team, which consists of Ravage and Laserbeak. Of course, as you can see, they all somewhat resemble each other, but everybody's significantly smaller in the new toys. So that's something that we'll just have to deal with on them, but regardless, the original gimmick that Soundwave made famous is still usable, and we will show that off over the course of the video. But I think first of all, we're going to take a look at the members of his spy team and compare them with each other. We'll start off with Ravage. So here's the Generation 1 version of Ravage. And then by comparison, his considerably smaller SIEGE version. It's nice that they still keep him over as a black cassette tape-like thing. But of course, the most noticeable thing about the Generation 1 version are his two chrome bombs that he carries on his backside, which the new version does have, but as you can see, they are considerably smaller and are probably more cannons than bombs itself. Articulation-wise, the original Ravage could raise his head up and down. He also had a movable tail, and each one of his legs could be independently moved at the hip, at the knees, and at the ankles. Of course, his back legs have knees too, so he had quite a bit of posability on him for a figure of his size. The modern SIEGE Ravage, he doesn't have a tail, but you can lower his head, so his head does go up and down. There is a joint at the hip for his legs, and a joint at the knees, so his legs can be bent around and rotated around as such. So he has somewhat less range of motion than the original one does, but it's about what you would expect when you consider the fact that he's roughly about a third of the size of the original toy. Now, let's get them both into cassette mode and see how they look there. And here they are now, both in their cassette forms. This is the original Ravage in his cassette mode. All of his details were painted on, save for maybe this piece in the center. That was probably a sticker. And at any rate, here's the modern SIEGE version of Ravage, and while it doesn't look like an audio cassette, it does resemble the shape of it, and it will allow him to be stored inside Soundwave. We'll show that to you in a moment, but first, let's move on to Laserbeak. And then now here we have Laserbeak. Here's the original Laserbeak. He was famous for being one of the earliest ones taken off the market. Of course, he was also famous at that time because these gun barrels on his toy were very easy to break. And then we have the new version of Laserbeak, which definitely looks more robotic than the original one, especially with the whole head, practically most of the whole head painted for his eyes. And of course, he's noticeably lacking the guns on the original, from the original. Articulation-wise, the original Laserbeak could move his head and neck, both the base of the skull and the base of the body. And of course, there were joints that allowed his wings to swivel back and forth, or at about the elbow as well, so he had a fairly decent range of motion for simulated flight. New Laserbeak carries over the same thing with the head, as he can be bent at the base of his skull and at his body. He only has the one articulation on his wings, and it's mainly used to transform him. And of course, we can also spread his legs out about so far. So, there we go. Let's flip them into cassette mode and take a look at that. Now here they are, both in cassette mode. Here's the original Laserbeak. And of course, all of his details was provided by stickers, which the new one sort of improves upon while not looking exactly like a cassette. All the details are molded in and painted on, so they look a little bit better. But of course, let's get on with the real reason that we're here. We're all here to see Soundwave. And here are both versions of Soundwave. Over here we have the 1984 original, and over here is the SIEGE version. Both of them were famous for the gimmick of that we could push the button on here and we could drop one of them in as a cassette tape. Look right here, we'll put Ravage in, and there you go. Well, the new one also carries over and retains that gimmick. It also has a bonus gimmick that goes along with his minions. On the backside of both of them, it does have a little peg that can be pulled out on them. And then they can both be plugged in into the new Soundwave's shoulders, like so. And then they function as little tiny shields. Basically how they're described in the instruction manual. Let's see here. Yep, they're both listed as Sonic Surge Drone Armor. So, yeah, I don't see how they're going to protect him from much. Well, like on the original, we'll pop Ravage off, fold the pin back under, get the arm out of the way, and we'll show you that it works just as well. You lay him in there, all the way in, and there we go. He fits inside perfectly. Articulation-wise, the original Soundwave was no slouch on articulation. You could turn his head from side to side, and due to the way it was transformed, he could look up. Could rotate his arm at the shoulder all the way, and you could bend his arm at the elbow about 90 degrees. His legs were done up so that they could be put out where he could do a splits, primarily for transforming him into his different modes. But he could basically do it like that. He could only lift it at the side, not at the front. And he can bend his knee, but he bends it in the wrong way. Whereas now with the new Soundwave, we can turn his head from left to right, and as it's on a ball joint, it can look up and down to a degree. He can raise his arms out at the shoulder, about so far, and rotate his arm at the shoulder all the way. Can bend his arm at the elbow 90 degrees, and he does have a swivel at the bicep and at the wrist, so he does have full swivel arm battle grip. You can spread his legs apart into a full splits. You can raise his legs up at the hip about 90 degrees, and he can bend his leg at the knee about 90 degrees. So quite a range of motion for Soundwave. And of course, before I transform him, there is a bonus weapon feature that I saw on one of the displays from a video on YouTube that was taken at one of the toy expos where the Siege toys were shown off. They had Soundwave displaying his weapons. Get the gun out like this, insert the missile launcher like so. Then you put it back in his hands like such. And Soundwave does have a rather crude looking warhammer. Now granted, it looks more like a heavy sledgehammer that you'd find on a construction site, but it is a nice little option. Certainly something different, at least. Alright, let's get these guys flipped into their alternate modes and see the difference. What a comparable difference that we have here. Of course, the original one transforms into something that resembles a 1970s or 80s style Sony Walkman, whereas the new version becomes some sort of Cybertronian hovercraft, according to official sources. So, quite a considerable difference, especially when you look at the fact that Soundwave has become a lot of different alternate modes over the years. So, quite a considerable difference. And for any of you fans who might be wondering, yes, the tape door is featured at the back of him now, and it is still totally usable. So, at least that's still usable just like it is on the original. So, all in all, a nice added feature that works well for this toy, either for the original and for the new one. And it is nice for him to give us a rough idea as to what Soundwave might have been back on Cybertron. And this is a way that works, that allows for the Micromaster spy team that he now has to work with him. So, all in all, a nice feat of imagination and engineering. And that concludes my comparison review of Soundwave Generation 1 and Siege versions. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this video, please leave me a thumbs up here on YouTube. If you're new to my channel, please hit the subscribe button down below so you can join up in our ranks. And also, ring the bell so you'll be notified when I post new content. And also, please consider sharing your thoughts of Soundwave in the comments down below. This is Sparkster1701 saying I will catch you all later.